protect and defend the Constitution. That's what I swore to do. I put my hand on the Bible and took that oath. And that's exactly what I am going to do.
In the past several weeks, your policy on Iraq has generated opposition from the governments of France, Russia, China, Germany, Turkey, the Arab League, and many other countries, opened a rift at NATO and at the UN, and drawn millions of ordinary citizens around the world into the streets in anti-war protests. I ask, what went wrong that so many governments and peoples around the world now not only disagree with you very strongly, but see the U.S. under your leadership as an arrogant power?
I think you'll see when it's all said and done, if we have to use force, a lot of nations will be with us. Iraq will serve as a catalyst for change, positive change. So there's a lot more at stake than just American security and the security of people close by Saddam Hussein. Freedom is at stake as well, and I take that very seriously.
Mr. President, there are a lot of people in this country, as much as half by polling standards, who agree that he should be disarmed, who listen to you say that you have the evidence, but who feel they haven't seen it, and who still wonder why blood has to be shed if he hasn't attacked us.
If they believe he should be disarmed, and he's not going to disarm, there's only one way to disarm him. And that happens to be my last choice, the use of force.
Mr. President, millions of Americans can recall a time when leaders from both parties set this country on a mission of regime change in Vietnam. 50,000 Americans died. The regime is still there in Hanoi, and it hasn't harmed or threatened a single American in the 30 years since the war ended. What can you say tonight, sir, to the sons and the daughters of the Americans who served in Vietnam to assure them that you will not lead this country down a similar path in Iraq?
It's a great question. Our mission is clear in Iraq. Should we have to go in, our mission is very clear. Disarmament. And in order to disarm, it will mean regime change. I'm confident we'll be able to achieve that objective in a way that minimizes the loss of life. No doubt there's risks with any military operation. I know that. But it's very clear what we intend to do.
Mr. President, are you worried that the United States might be viewed as defiant of the United Nations if you went ahead with military action without specific and explicit authorization from the UN?
No. I'm not worried about that. When it comes to our security, we really don't need anybody's permission.
Mr. President, as the nation is at odds over war, with many organizations like the Congressional Black Caucus pushing for continued diplomacy through the UN, how is your faith guiding you?
My faith sustains me because I pray daily. I pray for guidance and wisdom and strength. If we were to commit our troops, I would pray for their safety. And I would pray for the safety of innocent Iraqi lives as well.
As you know, not everyone shares your optimistic vision of how this might play out. Do you ever worry, maybe in the wee small hours, that you might be wrong and they might be right in thinking that this could lead to more terrorism, more anti-American sentiment, more instability in the Middle East?
I think, first of all, it's hard to envision more terror on America than September the 11th, 2001. We did nothing to provoke that terrorist attack. It came upon us because there's an enemy which hates America. They hate what we stand for. We love freedom and we're not changing. I think of the risks. I've calculated the cost of inaction versus the cost of action. And I'm firmly convinced if we have to, we will act in the name of peace and in the name of freedom.
Mr. President, as you said, the Security Council faces a vote next week on a resolution implicitly authorizing an attack on Iraq. Will you call for a vote on that resolution, even if you aren't sure you have the vote?
Yes. Well, first, I don't think it basically says that he's in defiance of 1441. That's what the resolution says. And it's hard to believe anybody saying he isn't in defiance of 1441. because 1441 said he must disarm. And yes, we'll call for a vote. No matter what the whip count is, we're calling for the vote. We want to see people stand up and say what their opinion is about Saddam Hussein and the utility of the United Nations Security Council. And so, you bet.
During the 2000 campaign, you were on the program and we were talking about the Persian Gulf War and looking back, and I asked whether you had any regrets about taking Saddam out at that time. And you said no. And then you added this, and I want to talk about it. Let's watch.
Conversations I had with leaders in the region afterwards, they all supported the decision that was made not to go to Baghdad. They were concerned that we not get into a position where we shifted, instead of being the leader of an international coalition, to roll back Iraqi aggression to one in which we were an imperialist power, willy-nilly moving into capitals in that part of the world, taking down governments.
Imperialist power, moving willy-nilly, taking down governments. Is that how we're going to be perceived this time?
Well, I hope not, Tim. And of course, in '91, there was a general consensus that we'd gone as far as we should, that we'd achieved our objectives when we liberated Kuwait.
If your analysis is not correct, then we're not treated as liberators but as conquerors, and the Iraqis begin to resist, particularly in Baghdad. Do you think the American people are prepared for a long, costly, and bloody battle with significant American casualties?
Well, I don't think it's likely to unfold that way, Tim, because I really do believe we will be greeted as liberators.
Why not just keep the pressure on, keep the troops there, keep the threat going, and continue to let the inspectors destroy weapons?
Because we know you can't keep the troops there forever. And right now, without a strategic decision on the part of Saddam Hussein to comply, I'm as sure as of anything I've ever been sure of, if the pressure comes off, he will go back to his old pattern of behavior.
Have you effectively given up trying to get 9 affirmative votes among the 15 members of the Security Council?
I don't want to rule out any option that might be available to us right now, because this is what the leaders are discussing in the Azores this afternoon.
So is it still possible there might yet be another UN Security Council vote?
It is the option, one of the options that is available.
We've had a really good discussion. We concluded that tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world. Many nations have voiced a commitment to peace and security, and now they must demonstrate that commitment to peace and security in the only effective way, by supporting the immediate and unconditional disarmament of Saddam Hussein.
From the perspective of the security of the world, we cannot simply go back to the Security Council for this discussion to be superseded by that discussion, to be superseded by another discussion.
When you say tomorrow is a moment of truth, does that mean tomorrow is the last day that the resolution can be voted up or down, and at the end of the day tomorrow, one way or another, the diplomatic window has closed?
That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, sir.
Earlier today, Britain and the U.S. gave up their bid to win new authorization for action against Iraq rather than face defeat from the UN Security Council. We now take you live to the White House for the President's address.
My fellow citizens, events in Iraq have now reached the final days of decision. The United Nations Security Council has not lived up to its responsibilities, so we will rise to ours. In recent days, some governments in the Middle East have been doing their part. They have delivered public and private messages urging the dictator to leave Iraq so that disarmament can proceed peacefully. He has thus far refused. All the decades of deceit and cruelty have now reached an end. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately. My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.